Hello. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Juliana with us. So Joseph's here as well, maybe.
In spirit.
Oh. Do you want to introduce yourself, however much you want to share, and also your pronouns?
Kia ora koutou. My name is Juliana and my pronouns are she, her. I grew up in like the Matamata Tiro area and with a massive family, 6 siblings and family all over there's lots of us. And then moved here to Hamilton for uni, and that was in 2011, and I've been stuck here ever since.
Stuck here.
Yeah. Loving life at university ever since. No.
Yeah. Do you want to
Some
elaborate on
days.
that stuck here?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts? What do you think about Hamilton?
I actually really like it. I know
Yeah.
a lot of people kind of, aren't very nice about Hamilton. But I like that it's bigger than a town, but not like Auckland either. Yeah.
I'm the same.
It's like a nice in between, like some
Yeah.
good places to eat, lots of lovely people, and yeah.
But it's growing too fast. It's growing way too fast. I'm like, no, I don't want your upgraded like traffic.
So true.
But yes, I'm on the same wavelength.
So we are curious, how, like, what communities do you identify with, or like identify yourself within?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I never know what word to use for this. Good, like, and I guess that's kind of part of your question as well, is like the LGBT plus community. But then is that the word that, not everyone likes that choice of word, and then I never kind of know what word to use. So I tend to just go with not straight because it's kind of very broad.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah. And then, as we've talked about, the CrossFit community is a very big one for me as well. And then I suppose at the uni, you've got like a community there because you're like weirdly a student, but also because you're a graduate student, you kind of know the staff as well. So you're a bit of a weird in between in that space, I think. And I don't know. In Pākehā, I don't really think of that as a community so much as like a colonising thing. But,
Oh my God, you see one of my favorite words.
Go there.
Yeah. Because, I don't know, it doesn't feel like a community so much as like a structural system that needs to change.
Totally agree.
So.
Yeah, identify with that as well. Like in regards to like the LGBT community, like there's such a white Western acronym.
Yeah.
But then as a white person, do we have agency to use anything but that?
Yeah.
But then how do we be inclusive of our Pacifica and our Indigenous and our people of colour within our community without speaking for them?
Yeah.
So I use queer. I'm like, I'm queer. And it's also like, fuck history at the same time.
Yeah. That's a good call.
Yeah. But I like that because it's not gendered and it doesn't assume my gender or a partner's gender.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I suppose it's the hard. I guess it depends on what you're like, whether I look at it at a personal level like that or whether you're looking at it at a community level. Because I've found, like in the few years of doing my thesis, like terminology has been probably the biggest conversation that we've had over and over and over again. And because it changes so quickly as well. And we kind of just ended up using like gender, sex and sexuality diverse as like a broad kind of heading for it, but then using the language that the participants use themselves within those written and verbal spaces. So kind of like, I don't think there's any perfect answer to terminology, but more so about using the language that people themselves use because that's what best fits them or,
Like self-identification.
Yeah.
And do you think that that's a way that you can offer support in that community without being like, you have to conform to what my research thinks?
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing. And we talk about it like you might have seen in class with feminism as well, like with this question, like what is the end goal? What does equity look like for everyone? But it's so different for everyone. And within this like community that we call ourselves, everyone under that umbrella is so different and has such different needs and different ideas of what the equity looks like. And the one thing that everyone in this group really has in common is the fact that they're outside of that like heteronormative, cis-normative kind of understanding of what the world is. But other than that, everyone is very different. Which makes it so interesting in terms of doing this research, because everyone's going to have very different ideas about what they want and what I guess is marginalizing for them, because it's going to be different based on their identity. So
I guess in hearing that, are you like subliminally saying that society's ill-equipped to handle difference or indifference?
Yeah, I guess because we're so like the way that history's been, there's such a kind of discourse around what's normal and what we consider normal to be. And in the area of this, it's kind of like people that are cisgender and people that are heterosexual and that are not intersex, like that's our normal per se within Aotearoa after colonisation. Like this is what normal has looked like. And so anyone outside of that normal, you're like that, as we talk about, that marked term because you're outside of that kind of normal understanding of what things are. And so from there, you kind of have to explain to people who you are, like coming out again and again. We talk about coming out as one thing, but it's not, obviously. You've got to come out again and again because you are outside of that norm. And so it's like, how do we reach a point where diversity is normalized, but such a broad range of diversity, which is so tricky, I think.
You're right. And what are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree. The common narrative within queer representation, particularly in media, is coming of age or like you're coming out sorry. I'm like, fuck off. That's like one conversation of the 10,000 times I'm going to have to come out throughout my life. And coming out that first time is often a big conversation and a big step in your identification within the world. But I have to come out every day. And it might not be a conversation. It might be the way that I dress makes me come out every day, or the language that I use in a particular environment, or like my partner rather than, not that I have one, but my partner rather than like.
That was a shameless plug.
Call me. I need love.
Don't be so selfish. We all do.
Whatever. Yeah, I need it more.
The only reason I say that is because I see diversity as like layered as well. Because I think for me, for using it from like a non-queer space, from Pacifica space, diversity to me is like attached to acceptance, and I'm like, I don't want to be accepted. I want to be loved. Like, I don't want to be accepted for my diversity. I want to be loved for my diversity as added value. And I think that has similar nuances to my space that I hold in the queer space as well as the Pacifica space, where I'm like, this diversity, like we've diluted that word to a point where it's like it means acceptance for everyone's indifference, and I'm like, okay, that's at the shallow waters. In the deep waters, it's love for everyone's and appreciation and added value because of the indifference. Because for me, I feel like all of our voices that are pushing it uphill, if the people uphill answered the questions or considered the questions or the issues that we're raising, it would change the whole approach of how society supports. But instead, we're looked at as like, oh, you're complaining again, or oh my God, the queers are barking again. And I'm like, wait, so we can hear your truth and we can coexist within your truth, but when the roles are reversed, it's a problem?
And our voice is so minimal in comparison to theirs.
Oh, yeah. And that's attached to so many other things. But your thoughts?
So what you were just saying kind of made me think about in terms of like that idea of normalization is, so the fact that like you get that whole, oh, you're like shoving it in our face or whatever because, you know, you want to like have movies or be in like represented in like media and stuff. And it's like your heteronormative cisgender stuff is so normalized in the media and that kind of thing, that the reason that it feels like it's being shoved in your faces is because you've never fucking seen it before, and now all of a sudden it's there, and it's not even normalized. It's just this one movie or this one representation in some kind of advert, and you feel like you're dying because you have to see us when actually we're human and we're here, and you walk past us on the streets every fucking day, and actually you kind of have to deal with the fact that we're here whether you like it or not.
Oh my God. Honestly, that was some big dick energy right there. I love that.
I get very like,
No, I love it. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I'm here for it, because to me, these are the conversations that I yearn for. Like, and if different variety, because I know I'm not the only one who like feels like, I feel like my truth is my truth, but my truth never gets to see the day of light in different spaces and places because of my different identities that I hold. And it's like, I understand your system and I'm trying to add value to your system from my perspective. And that's kind of like an uphill battle constantly to a point where I'm like, okay, so instead of me coexisting and being a creative freedom, like to innovate and engineer my own reality, I'm having to put out fires. And I'm like, I don't want to be a counterbalance or counter argument all my life, because you've put me in that situation. I haven't had to counterbalance until I came out of my communities. But I just want to do a throwback to high school. Communities within high school. What were those? What did that look like?
I don't know. Matamata was a very small town. Very white bread town. I played a lot of football, to be honest, and I obviously had friends at school and stuff. We used to read a lot at lunchtimes, very nerdy. But I used to actually spend a lot of my time outside of school hanging out with people from Korero, because people were very kind of chill from there, which was a bit more my scene than Matamata has a broad generalisation. Or Matamata, as a lot of the people like to pronounce it from there.
Matamata.
What's the matter?
Mata.
I don't know. I think, and it's probably quite different. I really hope it's quite different now, but it's probably not. You find a lot of people kind of not come out, but come out, after high school. You don't hear a lot about diversity in Matamata at all. And then kind of you leave high school and everyone goes off to university or off to different cities and does what they do, and that's kind of when you find out that, there is diversity, and the people from there, just no one really felt comfortable talking about it at high school because it just wasn't an open thing. So yeah, I don't know, I go back to see family.
I've got a couple of friends from there, and it's the same kind of thing. Like their whānau's still there, but they only visit.
Yeah. And I think that's the interesting thing about uni, and what was interesting with my master's thesis looking at halls is a lot of people do come from like quite rural places where there's not a lot of diversity at all. And then they get to uni and it's just such like an eye-opener for them. Or even in the paper that we've got where around gender and sexuality, it's such an eye-opener for people because they've just never had that lived experience of being around people that are different to who they are.
Yes, agreed.
I feel like that was a really PC way to introduce like the fact that there's too many people that are comfortable.
Yeah.
And seeking validation for their homophobia.
What? What
do
was that? Okay, we're not going to dive
into
that.
Can you give us a quick synopsis of your research?
Yeah, so, quick. Okay.
No.
No, not quick. Just like, don't read the whole thing to us.
No, it's kind of got like a weird backstory to it where for my master's, I looked at, it ended up being heterosexuality in halls because with a master's project being smaller and not a lot having looked at that in New Zealand at halls of residence and sexuality, they said kind of start there as like a starting point. And so I did, but still the conversations that I had there were some of the staff in halls saying, well, anyone that's not heterosexual, we don't know how to support them. Like, what do we do to make halls a safe and comfortable place for them? And I was like, oh, that's really interesting that they don't know. So I, ended up for my PhD thesis looking at sexuality and gender on campus and what the campus experience is like for people. Just like, I mean, more generally looking at people that are gender and sexuality diverse as a broad term. But just looking at gender and sexuality broadly on campus and what it's like and how we can make it a better place, both in terms of it being more inclusive, but also how to maybe better educate people about gender and sexuality so that we can reach that point of equity. That makes sense. Yeah.
What are some of your findings?
I think one of the most interesting ones for me anyway was kind of maybe, I guess we could call it a generational difference, is when you look at, say, staff on campus and even, say, my supervisors, you're kind of coming from that place in the past and still current, but for them particularly a place of advocacy and like, you know, having pride parades and being visible and having that advocacy in spaces. But for a lot of the younger people in the research, and I often forget that I'm like 10 years older than they all are, because it's hard to accept, but they talked about feeling like that's still really important, and for some people that's really what they love to do, and that's totally great. But for a lot of them, it's about reaching a point where your identity is, I guess, unmarked. So people will just kind of accept you as who you are without it being a big deal. So you could sit in your classroom and casually say, oh yeah, I've got a girlfriend, and no one bats an eye. Or like there's, you know, all-inclusive bathrooms, and that's just a part of the way of being. So reaching, for them, it was like reaching a point beyond advocacy where it's not needed anymore, and it's just, there's no such thing as a normative gender or sexuality. It's just everyone is everyone, which I thought was quite interesting. But again, it's like what that means such different things for different people. So,
Did you find that there was any difference between people from a variety of ethnic backgrounds?
Yeah, it was really, I think one of the interesting things about this was that intersectionality, which you don't necessarily see a lot of in the research, but I purposely included questions around like, you know, this research is focusing on gender and sexuality as the main thing, but that's not the only aspects of people's identity. If you feel comfortable, can you tell me more about other, I guess, aspects of your identity that relate to your gender and sexuality and how that might play out in the campus space? And for a lot of people, it was kind of like, well, my Māoritanga intersects with my queerness. And so, you know, I want spaces that are representative of both. And we don't necessarily have those spaces that are representative of both. Or another really big one was actually people on the autism spectrum saying, I don't have a safe space I can go because I don't feel comfortable going into rainbow spaces. But also there's not really a space for me where both of those things intersect. Yeah. And then also people that feel like they're not sure if they're a part of the community. So like when I did my focus groups, I used the like LGBTQIA+ acronym, and I had a whole bunch of people come and they said, oh, well, you know, I'm asexual, and if you hadn't have had the A in the acronym, I probably wouldn't have messaged you because I didn't know if I was welcome or not. So that,
what?
Yeah. Yeah, and even for a lot of bisexual people, it's like I've got, like, say I'm a cis woman and I've got a boyfriend, and so I don't know, like, if I can actually go to these spaces. So there was a lot of people where they weren't kind of sure if this was for them, which I thought was quite interesting as well. So.
Wait, so how did you navigate that space? Because I feel like, did you already know in your heart and full-heartedly that was a space for them, or was it kind of like you just went with whatever you had? Because I guess like the research part is always like there's a duality to it where it's like, am I gonna get the best like people that can relate to this, and then at the same time, am I gonna get enough?
Yeah.
You know? So it's like, you speak on that.
Yeah, I think it was quite interesting because for me, I guess it was always, although I hadn't verbalized it at the start of the research, it was kind of the point was to be inclusive of everyone outside of that heteronormative, cisnormative way of being. And so I was just kind of wholeheartedly accepting of anyone that felt like they didn't fit in that kind of way that the world looks at things, which is why I found it quite interesting when there were people in my research that weren't accepting of others outside of that. So like you'd get like
the opposite effect.
there was, say, like participants in the survey, one of them was very like exclusionary of gender diversity, but they themselves were sexuality diverse. I won't use the specific terms they use, so I'm not like labeling that specific person for anonymity reasons. But it was like they were exclusionary of other people that were outside of that norm, which actually really fucks me off. But like I find it really interesting that people can be excluded for being different, but then exclude others for being different. I guess I don't quite understand how that works. Yeah.
Would you say that that's like mild hypocrisy, or is it just like?
I think so. Yeah. I feel like if you yourself have had that experience of being othered, why would you other different people? Like, what, that doesn't feel good. That you want to be accepted in society and for people to, be okay with who you are. So why would you put that othering on other people? It makes me really mad.
Oh God, I could listen to you talk about that all day.
Do you think that's them like coming to a point of, oh, well, I'm not being oppressed anymore, so I deserve this? They'll get their turn sometime. Like
at different points in your life, you're going to be privileged and oppressed for different reasons, depending on where you are and the people that you're around and the society that you're in. And it really aggravates me when people don't have that self-awareness to actually think, I've experienced that shit feeling. I'm now privileged and I should actually be using that privilege to help these people rather than just, like you said, and people do it like, oh, well, now I'm all right, so why should I worry about everyone else? It's like, I don't know, be a decent fucking human being and actually care about others and acknowledge your privilege and use that to help other people. It's not that hard.
That conditioning's real though.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, in a way, that was the conversation that we were having before around All Lives Matter on a black. Yeah. So to me, that doesn't. Yeah, I feel like it's just complex and it doesn't even add value. Like, and I love that you can articulate it in a way that I'm like, fucking be a good human.
Yeah. Like it shouldn't. And if it's tiring for you to be a good human and point the odd thing out, imagine how fucking tiring it is for people that have to live like this every day of their lives. Like, why? Like, it's not that hard for you to point out a little thing that a person's doing, or it may be like a little bit hard, like, oh, you probably shouldn't use gay in that way or something. Like, that might be a bit hard for you for 10 seconds to say to someone that you know, but it's like that's one tiny moment of your life where you felt uncomfortable, whereas the people where that affects them every fucking day. Like live with that uncomfortableness. We're all going to have to be uncomfortable at some point in our lives, and by your little bit of uncomfortableness, you're making other people's lives better in the long term.
That ripple effect, eh?
Yeah.
I heard this thing once, and it was roughly like, if equality feels like oppression, you've been privileged way too long.
Yeah. So true.
You're gonna cry?
No, I'm just laughing because it's like in my head I'm like, fucking A, like can this
you can cry about it.
This is literally the best thing, because in a way I'm just like, it's a sad day that to admit that I'm not privileged to these type of conversations all the time. You know what I mean? Like we have to create spaces to have these conversations.
Hold space for these conversations.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. But going back to support, and I feel like that's literally a little bit like there's like these common themes around that. With your communities and your community that you come from, how is the support for you personally? So go take it to high school, or otherwise take it even further.
Like CrossFit, like what you were saying.
Oh
before.
yeah, so inclusive there. Like everyone's so welcoming and accepting of others, and I just the friends that I've made there are just amazing. Like everyone just wants you to be the best you, whatever that looks like for you, which is such a good feeling, because you just know that everyone there is going to be supportive of each other, no matter like what they're striving for within that space. And so that makes a huge difference. And then I don't know, No, and in the research it's interesting as well. Like it can be family or friends for people, but it depends on, I guess, the family and friends that you've got. So like my family, they're real chill actually, real chill. I always told Dad that I didn't want to have kids. I was like, I'm not getting pregnant. Like, I do not want to have children. Like, I know you want grandkids, but I'm really sorry you're not getting them from me. And then because I had a boyfriend for, God, like over 7 years, and I was always very adamant about it. And then I ended up with my girlfriend that I've got at the moment, and I took her home, and I was like, Dad, this is my girlfriend, just like, you know, very casual. And one of the first things that he kind of clicked onto, he was like, oh, does that mean I might get grandchildren now? And I was like, oh, that's quite a cute way of thinking about it, Dad. Cool. So, yeah, very, very, very chill, which is, yeah, it was real funny. So they just, but I think because for him, like I'd played soccer as a teenager, and if you think about that kind of stereotype, I guess he was kind of, and he coached the team a lot, and I think even from a small town, like you kind of, you know, learn a bit being around women that play soccer. And so for him, it was just kind of like, oh yeah, very chill. Yeah.
But meanwhile, in his head, called it. Like goes to mum, you owe me some like,
$50. Yeah. From 20 years ago. Yeah. Funny.
So true.
That community that you have at CrossFit, do you think that those people support other, like the amount of support that they show in the CrossFit community, do you think that they show that in other facets of their life as well, or do you think that it's a CrossFit thing?
Oh, that's really interesting. I would imagine and like they're not necessarily the most like knowledgeable about gender and sexuality per se, so much as they're just very like supportive of people being the best version of themselves. So I don't know if they like go out in other areas of their lives and like are perfectly aware of maybe say the privileges and stuff that they have. But I think they're very open to like having conversations about stuff and being supportive of others and like others succeeding in their lives, whatever that looks like.
Because it wouldn't be a far cry from like what it actually like. Because I feel like once you kind of know the framework on how to like just accept difference and support difference, it's almost like, oh, okay, it's not like, oh, I think I know this from somewhere. Like, so it's like it's kind of ingrained in you, and especially CrossFitters go like a minimum of 2 to 3 times, like minimum of 3. And then maximum of every single day of the week. So in a way, I think because you're constantly introduced into that type of whakaaro in your head and in your mind, it might have nuances. But I love that you're saying as well that like, you know, not every CrossFitter is there to be like, how am I going to accept everyone today? But I guess in a way to go off her question, if that type of like radical love for self growth and like all of those things, if that's nuanced in society, would that make it different?
I think
if we take that type of support from CrossFit and put it into like, let's say the Hamilton City Council or something like that, would that change?
Yeah, because that's going to happen.
Oh, come on, I'm allowed to dream.
It would be amazing, wouldn't it? Like, wouldn't it be just so, I don't know, beautiful if the world just like cared about everyone else being their best selves? Like right from when they're little, just like you do you, whatever that means for you. Like don't harm others, obviously, but like live your best life where you can grow to your full potential of whatever that means. And we just love each other for who we are as people, whatever that looks like, whatever that means for each of us. And then not have all of these spaces where people are othered. And, like, nobody's perfect. Like, I'm not going to be, like, I've been studying this for years and I'm not perfect all the time. I'm going to make mistakes. Everyone's going to make mistakes. But it's about how we deal with those and converse about those and grow from those that I think is kind of the big thing. So I'm not, like, the world's not a perfect place and people need to learn about this stuff, but it's how they go about doing it and the conversations that they have and the willingness to grow, I think, is quite important as well.
Wow.
So.
No, those are some 3 like key elements. No, for real. Like I feel like even for me in my approach to trying to support anybody that comes to my life, I'm like I think I used to like approach it of being like, okay, I'm good at this, I'm going to support you my way. And I feel like your like free concepts actually turns my whole approach to being like, actually, what do you need from me and how can I add value to that?
Yeah.
Because I guess, you've called me out and I love it because that's what I'm here for. But at the same time, I think I could definitely see how I exerted my abilities to support on somebody rather than listening to see what I can actually do to add value to their personal journey.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm getting from you? Or?
Yeah, which I mean was a big learning journey for me as well, because with my partner, I'm always very like go, like very busy, and she lives a very like casually paced life, and I went through the same learning journey where like she might get annoyed about things, and I was very like, well, here are some solutions that we can go through to sort this, and she was like, sometimes I don't want solutions, I just want to sit here and maybe have a sulk about something, or sit here and like not, be annoyed about it and not necessarily deal with it at the moment. And for me that was kind of like I've never considered that there might be another way of dealing with this. And then it just kind of went broader than that, of kind of like, like maybe like everyone's got their own way of doing things, their own way of dealing with things, and their own way of being. And like it makes me a bit uncomfortable that she's not dealing with it, but that's my problem. That's not her problem. So it's kind of like accepting others for who they are. And it might make you uncomfortable, the fact that, you have to deal with the fact that you've had this privileged life in some ways and they haven't. And that's really shit that that's how the world's turned out. But to change that, we need to be uncomfortable and we need to have those conversations and we need to, help others grow so that we can all reach a place where, there's some equity. Or there is equity, I should say.
Yeah.
Not some, there is.
Only some people. Not you, though.
Sounds familiar at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No clue. Oh, God. We're so fucked.
In all the right ways and hopefully in all the right positions as well.
Oh, joke. Yes. Don't go there.
Look, I'm just allowing the listeners to fly away with the imagination.
Brief pause in talking.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess on the other side, or like flipping it on the other side, where like have you ever felt like you fell through the gaps or the support systems weren't actually there for you, and like is there any specific memories attached to that, or is there any specific like scenarios where you've actually felt like, okay, support is not present in the room?
That's such a hard one for me, because I think maybe with my way of being, it's not so much of an issue in some way. So like I remember my grandpa, I like told him and about my girlfriend, and he said, "Oh, I'm really disappointed, but I'll always love you." And I remember it really pissed off a couple of my family members. And like it was sad to read, but at the same time I kind of had that thing where I was like, this, like the way that you've been brought up, like this is really hard for you to wrap your head around. And I'm at a place where I'm so like comfortable in myself that I had that capacity to work with him and talk to him, and he's absolutely fine now, like loves my partner probably more than me, to be fair. Which like that's cool, like so
whatever, not affected at all.
Yeah, it's fine, whatever. But I guess in a way, I'm privileged in that respect, that for me I was capable of, having that comfort in myself that I could work with him and work through that with him, and things are now fine. And it's the same at uni, like doing gender and sexuality research and talking to people about it and talking to students about it, is I'm privileged enough that I'm comfortable with having these discussions and knowing that you're going to run into people that have no idea or that are very ignorant about things, and that the conversations are going to be hard to have with them. But I know that I'm in a place where I can do that, and so it would be a real shame if I didn't. And and I know that for a lot of people they are falling through the gaps. Like the uni in a lot of places has only binary toilets, and you know you've got staff that really aren't accepting of gender and sexuality diversity in different spaces, and you know there are things that are going on, and it makes life really hard for other people. And so I feel like it would be really, I don't think I would be comfortable with myself if I wasn't using this space of privilege and comfort with myself to try and better things for other people, I think. So myself, I haven't really experienced falling through the gaps. I'm pretty privileged. You know, I'm cisgender. The bathrooms aren't an issue for me personally. My supervisors are obviously very accepting because this is the area I'm doing research in, and it's obviously their research area too. So yeah, I myself have been quite lucky. So it feels like I should be using that space to support others, because why not?
Yeah.
Modeling exactly what you said before around being a decent mother effing human. So I'm like, I see consistency in you. I like it.
Do you feel like that you feel responsible for that? Or do you feel like it's just something that you want to do?
I think it's a mix of both. I don't know. I feel like since I you know, and obviously I'm not perfectly knowledgeable, but I know quite a bit about this topic. I've done this research where I've got these voices that have, like, people that have shared their voices with me about the experiences that they've had, and I think there's a sense of responsibility in relation to that, in terms of, well, if they've taken the time to share their experiences with me, the microaggressions they've had, the marginalisation that's happened, then I should be using my voice to share those, because they have taken the time to do that. But also I think it's just who I am as a person. I feel like this is what I feel this is the best use of my time personally. But I know that's not the case for everyone. Like one of the quotes that came out of the focus group was, you know, to do with icebreakers in classrooms, and you know, people start talking about their partners or whatever, and usually people are heterosexual, and they said you have that moment where, do you want to go through the whole "oh, you're gay" thing, and you know, for some people, and even for me on the odd day, like, it's just really fucking tiring, and you just don't want to have to deal with people and what they might say and the conversations you might have to have. But on a general day-to-day basis, I'm quite comfortable doing that. So it'd be a real shame if I didn't, I think. Yeah.
Do you think that visibility is important?
Yes.
I watched this episode on Apple TV called Visible Out on Television, and it's amazing. I cried my eyes out. And the first episode was all about context of how queer and trans people have been represented in television from when television started, and they've got up to, I don't know, like the 90s or something. And after watching that, I felt this overwhelming feeling of like gratitude and a sense of responsibility to be visible for the community. And it really solidified why, like, I'm so happy to put in my weekends on this podcast, or put in evenings, or like 10 o'clock Kiwis at night, to just like get shit done. Because this offers an opportunity for us to hold space and be visible for our community. So I'm just like in that vibe right now.
Ooh,
love it.
embrace it.
Yeah.
And because it makes such a difference for other people, I think, is the thing. So like,
yeah, for sure.
Like this will, like, with the research, for example, with me, or even with the paper that we're doing, like it's a small amount of my time that I use that's then going to have such a ripple on effect for other people. So like, you have people in the paper that are kind of like, oh, you know, I thought about that thing that you said about asking people about whether they've got a partner rather than assuming if they've got a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And like, that takes 5 minutes of my time to explain that that's really beneficial. But the ripple on effect that has for not only people that didn't understand, but also, like you said, the visibility and the fact that that's going to make such a difference for others. Like, what? Yeah, it I don't know. It just, I don't know where I was going with that, but it's just
barriers.
Yeah.
I think also it's really important for people who aren't out, or like for our young people to see that there's more than just this binary that we're bombarded by through society in so many different ways.
Levels.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess to me, do you think that this like, because to me, I'm thinking society kind of thinks that we need to hierarchy and put in place all our issues from like the most prioritized ones to the most like less prioritized ones. And in a way, do you think that there's a competition of where to put this? Like, you know, is there a hierarchy of like, do we deal with Māori issues first? Do we deal with like Pākehā issues first? Do we deal with Pacifica issues first? Oh, and then right in the farthest queue, there's the queer community issues, you know, like, so do you, like, tell me your thoughts around the hierarchy of issues within society, or have you thought about it?
Yeah, and I find it really interesting that it's so siloed as well, because, I mean, obviously there's going to be things that are very specific to those communities that need addressing, but you're also going to have people that are a part of these different communities at the same time where, like, sure, you can address one little thing that might help their life, but there's so much more to people than just that one aspect of them. So it feels like there needs to be this, like, big wraparound thing where we're looking at, and maybe this is just with I don't know how this would work like on a societal level, but thinking about it in terms of this research is it started as like what can we do to support, you know, gender and sexuality diverse people on campus, and then you realise that everyone in that community is so different and they've got these intersecting identities, and then it becomes, is it about that, or is it about these structurally normative things that we have that need breaking down so that we can look at these intersectional identities and make everyone equitable? So about, I don't know, it started at least with this anyway, to become more about the structural things and the breaking down of that normativity, rather than like, here's this pocket community that we need to look at to somehow to bring up and to bring up and to bring up. Instead, maybe it's about breaking down what we've got at the top rather than trying to bring up specific communities, maybe.
100%.
Yeah.
I totally get that.
That's like blowing my mind.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. Your thoughts?
I don't have any. That's just like exploded my brain.
She wasn't
honestly,
ready for
like,
the juice.
why are we trying to operate within a society that isn't made for us?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
You're amazing.
Are you 2 years old to that?
Yeah.
What? I thought you had this type of energy this whole time. You talk. Well, you speak the language of that type of energy.
Maybe I just didn't realise it.
And I think that's the thing, is like having these conversations helps to articulate these things, I think, because they're kind of there in your brain, but like talking about them, I think, helps to kind of bring it all to the forefront. Because like for a lot of this, we were like for years throughout my thesis talking about terminology and arguing about what terminology to use and da-da-da. And that's when we realised it was that broad overview of the not being normative within these spaces. And yeah, like I said at the start about how can we support these different people, and then you kind of have that realisation of actually it's about changing those structural things, because like you said, how can we rise within this space that's not actually built for us in any way? Yeah.
100%. And then at the same time, I guess, would that be demonstrated through like how these structures were put in place through history? Because I feel like tracing the genealogy of all of these structural systems actually does, in its own way, dismantle the perceived truths, because come on, we were sold the 20% of the iceberg with all of these structures, and we're still being sold the 20% of that, and the underlying philosophies are like...
And that's the crazy thing, because people are like, oh yeah, there's marriage equality, like things are great now. No, they're fucking not. Like even like you look at our education system, and right from the word go, kids are taught like, oh, you know, it's Mother's Day, it's Father's Day, people have a mum and a dad, like this is how life works, take this home to your mum and dad, blah, 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 blah. And then like you go to healthcare, and I'm sure like you two maybe have had similar experiences where they just assume that you are heterosexual and like, okay, so, you know, what birth control are you on? Oh, none. Okay, so
had that conversation
can you
before.
get pregnant? No. And then they look confused for a minute and you have to be like, well, here's me explaining my healthcare to you because you don't consider the fact that I might be different from that normative way of being. And so
it's always really fun when you've had your doctor since you were 7. So.
Oh, no. No, it's true. Like it is, and they just don't consider. And so it's like, sure, we can add in like a marriage equality, which is great. Like I'm not saying it's not great, but there's just so many of these structural things in place everywhere where you are considered outside of that normative way of being. And it's like you can do these pockets of things and we can, you know, talk to people and change general society conversations, which is great and needs to happen. But we also really need these structural things to change too, because they really instill right from the word go that like this is the normative way of being.
Yeah. Because I guess to me, I always look at those. So my current like master's journey has told me, well, people have shaped my thoughts around all of these thought leaders and like academics that have actually put in work to do, and they've done some really hard work. But one of my lecturers was just saying to me, they've done that work so that you can have a conversation with their work. And in a way, I'm like this, can we take that type of like framework and put it towards our policies and our legislation and all those things? They worked for a time, but because we're like, we've got new knowledge, we've got new ways of approaching things, we're way more innovative now. We need to have a conversation with all of those concreted policies, legislations and laws, because it's like, come on, they were built for a certain purpose. We've exceeded that purpose now. We need to change and adapt, or at least talk about shifting in the way that we're currently operating.
So true. So very true. Yeah. And people are so siloed. Like we do this as humans, like put people in boxes and things, which I mean, to some extent is useful, but there's also places like this where it's really not. And it's like, why aren't we having these across boundary conversations where researchers and academics are working in with policymakers, which I know happens a little bit, but, you know, actually listening and actually creating change would be nice. And then,
imagine.
Yeah, what? And so, I completely agree with what you said.
No, yeah, because that's the part where I'm like, okay, if I can see this, it only took me, I don't know, like one whole semester to get that type of understanding and the depth and the wealth of it as well. Because it's like, now I understand that my ancestors are not physically with us, but their thoughts are with us through literature, through all of these things. And it's like, I'm having conversations with my ancestors at a different level now, and it just crosses time and space. And that's not just for me, it happens for everybody.
Yeah. Very true.
And that's like, I guess that's why it's so important for me, positionality within your research as well. So did you want to talk about that or?
Yeah. So my background's community psychology, which is very applied, very practical. And so I've been working away at my thesis, and the kind of purpose of the whole thing was to have some kind of outcome or intervention that actually made like a practical difference and could be applied. And recently my supervisors were kind of like, well, what's your theoretical contribution? And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, you know, usually the purpose of a thesis is to contribute to some kind of theory or to add to what's already known in the theoretical world. And I was like, I haven't fucking thought about that. I don't know.
That's somebody else's privilege.
Yeah, like, what are you talking about? Because I was just so very, you know, from this community psych background where you want to practically use what you're researching and acknowledging your position as a researcher, knowing that I've got this privilege of doing this research and being in this space and having access to these voices. And to me, it just makes perfect sense to use that to create some kind of practical outcome that's going to benefit the people that have spoken to me. I mean, theory is important too, obviously, but for me, it's like in this area, the less important thing. Like, it's great to have theories, but if you're not actually using those theories to have any kind of practical outcome and create change, then what's the point? Like, all it's going to do is sit in a nice little journal article like every other theory and not actually make a difference to people's lives.
Juliana,
Agreed.
you're definitely coming back for more tea because you spilled too much tea, but at the same time, not enough.
Yeah.
I get very I could just ramble all day. It's pretty bad.
No,
It's not rambling. It's great.
All right, so I guess we've created the FAR queue because we believe that there's a lot of conversations that are still in the FAR queue and waiting to be. So waiting for their time in the limelight. Yeah. So I guess we want to give you the opportunity to, from your personal experience, what are conversations that you're seeing from your worldview that are in the FAR queue that needs to be brought to life?
Yeah. Oh, good question. I think the one thing that really gets me, and it comes back again, is to those structural things of I don't fully understand why it's acceptable for discrimination and marginalisation to happen in the first place. So, like, if we look at the uni systems and, you know, they've got their policies and they're like, you know, anti-bullying and da-da-da, that kind of thing. And we've kind of reached a point where it's, like, inclusive of culture. Obviously, it's not great. But, like, there's kind of that level of awareness there of what's maybe okay and not okay to say to a certain extent, like explicitly. But I don't know that we've necessarily reached that point with gender and sexuality. So, like, you know, I've had people in the research talk about, like, you know, lecturers will dead name me, or they'll, like, you know, give you, like, me bad grades once I came out to them, that kind of thing. And, you know, nothing's necessarily done about that because it's such an, like, gender and sexuality is quite a new conversation for a lot of people that they don't necessarily know how to deal with it. And even with students in the classroom, like, when there's kind of, like, I think one example that was given is one of the tutors said, you know, we're going to talk about groups that we're a part of, and a student said, well, I'm part of the LGBT plus community, and someone else in the class laughed and said, you know, that's not a group, and the student said, well, yeah, it is, and the tutor, I guess, didn't really know how to deal with it and just kind of brushed over it and quickly moved on, which, I mean, a bit hard for the tutor because they're not overly, like, prepared for these kinds of conversations. Like, they don't get the kind of training that they need, but then that also puts the student in a really uncomfortable space where their identity is marginalised by another student and it's not dealt with. Yeah. And I think one of the big things with this is, like, we need these conversations to happen in general, but we need these structural changes to happen as well, so that it's very clear that this kind of behaviour isn't okay, and that actually we are inclusive and we say what we mean and we do what we mean. So it's not just about that tokenistic, like, yeah, we're going to have this many Māori students and this many da-da-da, and this is, you know, we're gonna have this in place, and then actually not do anything with it, which really fucks me off too, with, like,
tell us all about it,
with organizations when they have those, like, tokenistic, like, oh, we're gonna do this, but it's so subjective what that actually looks like. So it's like, oh yeah, like, we're gonna create this strategy where we support these students, but you know, what does that actually look like? What are you actually doing to create change within your space? And to be fair to the uni, the new campus that they've got in Tauranga does have all-inclusive bathrooms, which is great and was needed, and, you know, it's that there are steps that are happening, but there's just so many structural things that need to change for this to be a space that's, like, how, like we were talking about before, how can you feel like you're equitable and part of a community if those spaces and structural systems don't support you? Yeah. So, like, obviously you want the people around you to be supportive, but you need those spaces to be supportive too.
Yeah. All right. And also to add value to that, I'm just going to insert the word education.
Yes.
So how do you feel? Look, so I agree with exactly what you said. How does education play a part of that?
I think you just need it right from the beginning. Like, it just makes, like, all those people are like, oh, my children aren't ready to, you know, have conversations like that. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? Like, these are people that are just, you know, they're people. That's life. Like, you can't just be like, they're not old enough to learn about that. How does that even work? That doesn't make sense. And if young kids are, like, you know, capable of learning that racism happens to them and homophobia happens to them, then why can't other kids learn that actually it's not okay to do that in the first place?
Totally agree.
What the fuck? So, I don't know. Like, and, you know, it doesn't, I think, particularly because of the topic, people get so uncomfortable because it, like, not gender as well, but sexuality, there's kind of that assumption that it's related to sex. And so they're like, oh, you know, kids shouldn't be having these conversations. You don't need to start that conversation when they're like 5. It could just be like, oh, you know, your friend has 2 mums, you know, that's what a family can look like, or, you know, whatever that means. And kids are actually really accepting when they're not taught from their parents that discrimination's acceptable. Like, kids aren't inherently racist or sexist or anything else, or homophobic.
Nurtured and trained, right?
It's all learnt behaviour.
Exactly. And so it's like, why can't we start these conversations when they're younger to the point where it's normalised that, you know, everyone's different, but we love people for their difference, not in spite of that difference.
Yeah.
Like, it just... And then you get to like high school and intermediate, and it's kind of like, you know, people have hetero sex, but you should, you know, not do it casually. You should find that partner that you love, and then like there's like a very set understanding of what sex and sexuality looks like. No discussion about gender other than the assumption that people are cisgender. And then so people just don't know any different necessarily, because they just, I mean, unless you are different yourself, but for all of the cisgender and heterosexual people, like they probably aren't even considering the fact that people might not fit into that because they're privileged enough to assume that that's the way of being.
Yeah.
And so why aren't we having these conversations right through education that actually everyone is diverse in so many different ways, and that's great, because if we were all the same, the world would be a really fucking boring place.
Yes,
like,
go there.
Totally agree.
All right. And the last question is, you've mentioned that you personally didn't feel like you fell through the gap in terms of support, but in terms of the recipe for support, what is one main ingredient that you reckon actually added value to the way your community supported you? So what's one key factor or one ingredient that you'd say?
That's such a hard one, because I feel like it looks so different for different people. Like, you know, I know people where they just would rather not talk about it, and that's cool, and that's their way of being, and like, great, if that works for you, then that's fine. And then for other people, it's like the visibility is really important, and the discussions about it are really important, and that kind of thing, and that's great as well. So I feel like it, and I found this with this research all the time, it's so hard to like have an answer of what equity looks like and what support looks like, because everyone is just going to be so different. But I think the main thing is about listening to the person that you're talking to. So like, rather than assuming, because like for me it's just kind of like, I'm just who I am, and that's cool, and I just want people to just kind of nod and say whatever, but that's, like I said, not the same for everyone. So it's about considering things outside of your own worldview and thinking, for this person it's really important for them that I acknowledge who they are and have these discussions. And for this person, not talking about it is going to make them feel more comfortable in themselves. So that's probably what I should do for them. So, yeah, I think the main thing is actually fucking listening to other people and, like, you know, having a conversation and accepting who they are for who they are, and, like, just living that, because if, you know, that's going to make them happy, and it's going to make you, like, you know, happy to, you know, that they feel loved, then why wouldn't you? I don't know. A lot of it feels like common sense, but maybe it's not. I don't know. Just like love people and be kind.
So.
Yeah. There's fucking, like, I don't get it. It's like, how does what my sexuality looks like impact on your life in any way whatsoever? The fact that this bathroom doesn't have a stereotype of like a figure with a dress on it, how does that actually impact your life when it still has a toilet in it? I don't quite understand why you need to get so triggered by these things when they don't fucking impact on you in any way, but they can make the world of difference to other people. It's not that hard.
I'm so glad you said that, because you've literally just induced a memory in me right now. And because I went through a stint in Christianity as well, and I still love all the people that I made genuine connections with. But when we were voting for the equal marriage, one of the leaders said to me, "I'm really disappointed in this because I won't get a chance to tick husband on the marriage to on the application. I'd have to tick partner." And in my head, I'm like,
was that a woman?
No, it was a male. So they said that they got annoyed that they wouldn't have to tick husband and wife on an application form. And in my head, I'm like listening to what you just said really affirmed the fact that I'm like, that was literally the most bullshit moment that they put me through. Where it's like you disregarded equality and equity for all over an application form. Yeah. And you're perceived right to tick an application form, where I was like, damn, they exerted their insecurities for me. And I'm like, oh snap. Yeah, so that was really brought it home for me there, actually.
It is, and it's like, maybe think outside of yourself and the fact that this is going to make such a difference for people's lives, when it's just one tiny moment that you're not actually going to, is that going to affect you in 6 months? Are you going to sit there and go, oh, this is so, one box? It's like, really?
That's what you're investing your energy into?
Yeah. It's like, wow, maybe just be appreciative of the fact that this one small thing that's in your life is actually going to be really wonderful for other people. Live with that discomfort for a minute. Everyone has to live with discomfort in their lives, and nobody likes it. I mean, none of us enjoy doing it, but that's how we grow, and it's actually going to change and make things better for others. So, suck it up.
Love it. Good way to end up.
Oh, thank you so much for dropping pure tea. That was some really juicy conversations there, and I feel like we could go on forever.
So good.
But at the same time,
we have to bring you back next season for another conversation.
Please.
No, I'm not even joking you. That was really good conversations. Any final thoughts?
Is there any, if people want to engage with your research, where can they find it?
So the report that I did for the uni is available through the University Research Commons. You can just search it in their Research Commons and it'll pop up.
University of
Waikato. And there's also, I'm on there, there's a trans health group at the uni, and I'm on their About Us page, and I think there's contact details on there as well. Through you all, if they want to get in touch with me. Yeah, cool. I'm always happy to talk about it.
Cool. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. It was really great. Joe, any final thoughts?
No, I feel like I'm really enriched right now, and at the same time affirmed, because I feel like a lot of the things that you said has kind of really concreted some areas for me where I was like, oh, I know this, but now it's I know and understand this now. Because it's strength. You've literally strengthened my underlying philosophies. So thank you.
Thank you. It was the same for me as well, talking to both of you. And I think that's why these conversations are so important, is because you have that opportunity, articulate these things and bounce ideas off each other about topics that aren't usually talked about. And it gives you that space to actually, come up with more concrete ideas about things. So thank you both.
Yes.
Thanks for
It's
coming.
a great segue to our sequence ender. The fuck you.
Also, you can follow us on Instagram.
Yes.
Fuck you podcast.
Hashtag social dilemma.
We're trying. All right, bye.
Bye.